It's coming right there in front of us, like a bus with all the brights on, screaming toward us at warp speed. Our feet are planted in the ground. Yes, it is the end of days for the Republican Party if Donald Trump doesn't get the nomination. There will be explosions, panic in the streets, large beasts with cloven hooves wandering communities, and we know this is true because Dr. Ben Carson tells us so. Wasn't he the man who was insulted and publicly humiliated by a certain GOP candidate? Once again, we dive into the waters where only the political animal can swim, staving off such dire warnings, and drove to America. Political brain cells still working out here along the high roads. We hope. Welcome in the former head of FEMA and now resounding across the Colorado Front Range on 630 KHOW every weekday afternoon from 4 to 7 p.m. Mountain Time, crushing the competition with the power of mortar and pestle, crushing those tiny marijuana seeds in taxable consumer goods. Michael Brown. And the senior political contributor at Forbes and Forbes.com, verbally commanding the airwaves of this planet and far into the outer reaches of space via Sirius XM POTUS 124 every weekday, 6 to 9 p.m. Eastern Time, seeking to prove every day there is a liberal who does not own every Barbra Streisand album. Rick Ungar.
How do you know I don't?
We're hoping, okay?
Who's using the marijuana seeds today?
Somebody went to see Batman versus Superman this weekend.
Yes, we did. We're going to do a whole segment on that at another time. But first, politics, my friends. Ben Carson warns the GOP of, quote-unquote, absolute destruction if Donald Trump is denied the nomination. All right, Mr. Brown, I take it to you. Look, we've talked about this before. Has he got it right?
Oh, I think the party's imploding regardless. But I think by the time we get to the convention, yes, there will be some drama, there will be some intrigue. But you know what? This has happened before. We'll go through this. And at the end of the day, I hate that phrase, but at the end of the day, you know what? We'll have an election, somebody will win, and the Republican Party will still be there come November 9.
It will be a different Republican Party, to be sure.
Oh, absolutely.
And by the way, Rick, Rick, I don't know if we've really talked about this, but in your impression, I mean, you've been around this a long time. If indeed the Republican Party undergoes this massive destructive change, then you looking at it from the other side, what would you hope that party then turns out to be?
Well, actually, it's funny, Ed. What I'm really more focused on, I got to tell you, is my side. Because while everybody's so busy watching what's happening in the Republican Party, what they're missing is that the Democratic Party is also undergoing a very fundamental change.
And you have already gotten to something which we will talk about after the break when we get to the left side of things. See, you jumped ahead and didn't think that I was thinking.
I'm sorry.
Like I said, brain cells working.
What do I hope for the Republican Party? Complete, utter destruction, just like the doctor suggested.
There you go. Somebody else also saw Batman versus Superman. Okay, let's move on to something else. Here's something interesting. Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker called into a Milwaukee radio station today and gave his presidential endorsement. Here's what he said.
Ted Cruz is the best position by far to both win the nomination of the Republican Party and to then go on and defeat Hillary Clinton in the fall this year.
Mr. Ungar, what say you then to the endorsement to Ted Cruz?
Well, I have to start by saying that there's no love lost between Ted Cruz and myself, for anybody who doesn't know that. But that said, his endorsement means nothing. But what does mean, so I think Ted Cruz will win in Wisconsin no matter what. However, I'll tell you what, I'd look very close at what Scott Walker's really got on his mind. It's driving him crazy that he got out of the campaign as early as he did, the way things turned out. He is praying for a completely destructed convention where they may just turn to who? Scott Walker, if not as their presidential nominee, as their vice presidential nominee.
What do you think about that, Mike?
Oh, I think every single candidate is thinking that who's no longer in the race. But I do think that Scott Walker's endorsement, I agree with Rick. I think that Cruz will win in Wisconsin. But I think the timing and that he's doing it now probably helps a little bit. But I'm one of these guys that thinks that endorsements are way overrated. On the margins, it'll help somewhat.
All right, now let's speak about somebody else. He who shall not be named. This time it is not Donald Trump. This time it is Paul Ryan, because today there's an awful lot of buzz once again, Mike, that Paul Ryan is sitting there and still might be the nominee in Cleveland. He swears he doesn't want it, but it's out there making the buzz. Come on, there's got to be a little truth to this. Maybe?
Well, of course, there's a little truth to everything. Every conspiracy theory has a kernel of truth that everybody gloms onto. So, oh, look, it's true, it's true. And I think what's going on right now is we're going through the throes of a campaign that has a lot of angry people, a campaign that has a lot of people that have glommed onto a particular candidate, and they think everybody else is stupid because they didn't glom onto their candidate. It's just the silly season of politics. Everybody take a deep breath, maybe come to Colorado, have a little marijuana, cool out a little bit. We'll get through this. We'll get through it.
He just admitted it, folks, and I didn't even have to press him on that one. That's the good part about it, okay? Wait a minute. But Rick, let me get to you about 40 seconds I got, then we'll take a break here. Paul Ryan is a guy who is seen as being very likable on a lot of sides from people. So, come on, wouldn't you have to admit that if indeed Paul Ryan snuck through there, got to be a little fear, regardless whether it's Hillary or Bernie Sanders. This guy might have enough to beat you.
Oh, I think he'd be a very serious candidate, and whether he wants it or not, all I can go by is he swore he did not want to run for vice president, and yet he did. He swore he did not want to be Speaker of the House, and yet he is. So his protestations leave little to be desired in terms of what he's really thinking. He'd be a very formidable candidate. I agree.
Wouldn't you agree, though? I mean, just like Michael said, come on, it's the silly season. People say things they don't mean, right?
You know, I can't call it silly anymore. It's gotten so twisted and so bizarre that I think we're past silly and into scary.
It has gotten, somebody called it depressing today, and I think they actually hit it. I think the nation is going to be in line for a lot of Prozac by the time this is done. Gentlemen, remain in your chairs. We depart to the right. We're going to move to the left after a short break. See, Rick Ungar just he got ahead of things here, but he has to understand there is a method to madness here. We will have first word of the steel cage winner-take-all match between Hillary and Bernie. Coming up next, and we continue on the Hard Line. Hillary Clinton cannot be the Democratic presidential nominee, and the logic is sound. Owners of dry cleaning establishments across America are determined to band together and ensure Bernie Sanders gets the nod because they can think of no other candidate who desperately needs their services. Let us expound and return to this edition of The Political Animal. Rick Ungar, co-host of Steele and Ungar, weeknights, Sirius XM POTUS 124. Former head of FEMA, now afternoon drive talker on 630 KHOW in Denver, Colorado, Michael Brown. Mr. Ungar, I then begin with you. You mentioned this. You got ahead of us. It's okay. Don't worry about it. We'll pull it back in here. There is now a lot of talk that even in Philadelphia, there's going to be a lot of trouble come the Democratic convention here. And you're right about many things. We pay so much attention to what's going on the right, Rick. The left has got their own problems right now. They really need a serious airing.
I don't think it's going to show itself in terms of an ugly convention. I think we know what's happened and what's happening, and that is Bernie Sanders is really the harbinger of where the Democratic Party is going. He won't win the nomination. It's not going to be an ugly fight. But, you know, we are going to have, I think, a unique situation. People like me who identify more as centrist left are really not going to be as welcome in the Democratic Party as we once were. And, you know, that has a lot to do with age and other things. It is decidedly moving left. I think what will happen after the convention, you will have Hillary Clinton as your nominee. I think you'll have Hillary Clinton as your president, but very possibly with a Congress where she has to spend more time going after Republicans to support her agenda than Democrats, because the Democrats may be so far to the left of her, she may have problems. There's a definite shift happening in the Democratic Party. It would be the story if it weren't for the Republicans.
So, Michael, are you going to agree with Rick here? Because an NBC News poll that came out, NBC News Survey Monkey Weekly Edition tracking poll, I love it, the titles get longer every day. The race has dipped between Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders to only a 6-point difference. And let's add to this, there's a report out here that Bernie Sanders and his people are working on ways to hijack those super delegates. Hillary has 469 in her corner. Sanders has just 29. So, come on, Mike, are we once again underestimating him?
No, I don't think we're underestimating him. I think we're underestimating the Clinton machine. The Clinton machine is still in place. The Clinton machine is going to do what it's going to do, and Bernie will not be able to get the nomination. And look, I agree with Rick wholeheartedly. I don't think that the Democrat convention will be necessarily as many fireworks. We won't see the backdoor intrigue, but I think that intrigue will be there. And to Rick's point, I think Bernie Sanders has very successfully moved the Democrat Party further and further to the left. Now, I don't necessarily agree that Hillary will end up being president, but if she does, and she doesn't have the coattails, then we're going to have another 4 years of what we've had for the past 4 years, and that is just gridlock. And I'm okay with that, because that's what the founders, said we would have, separation of powers, and gridlock is okay. So 4 more years of nothing getting accomplished.
Gee, what a shock. I never would have guessed. 2 minutes here. We wanted to throw something else into the mix, and I'll come to you first on this one, Rick. Vice presidential candidates. I mean, let's face it. You're going to get to a point eventually where this is important because it can tilt a ticket one way or another. When I look at the Democrats, I see Julian Castro, Tom Perez, Sherrod Brown, Al Franken. Do any of these make sense to you?
Yeah, I think Castro is a very good choice. Look, I've never been someone who believes that the vice presidential nominee does much for the ticket. They can do harm, as we saw with Sarah Palin, but not as much harm as sometimes heaped on her. I don't think they make that big of a difference. Just pick somebody who gives you, a good image, a good MO, somebody where the people go, yeah, I can accept them as president if something happens to the top of the ticket.
I got about 60 seconds left, Mike. To you on the right, though, if you look at what's happening, somebody to balance out Donald Trump, because there's a lot of negatives in there that the polls continue to tell us. Ted Cruz can't get the establishment vote. Apparently, he's got a lot of enemies also sitting on the right. So if you look there, you see John Thune, the senator, Susana Martinez. We see Nikki Haley's name. Do any of these, in your opinion, give the ticket enough to balance and make the unattractable attractable come November for the Republicans?
Well, I think people know my position. I'm not sure that there's anybody that would give balance to a Donald Trump ticket other than a clone of Donald Trump. So that being set that aside for a moment. I then worry about Nikki Haley won't accept that. I don't think Susana Martinez will accept that. Carly Fiorina's not going to accept that. I don't know who would accept to run with Donald Trump, simply because he is kind of that explosive, unpredictable personality. I'm not sure of all these people that I know personally that are running that they would want to subject themselves to it. So on our side of the aisle, the selection is going to be, I think, more intriguing because it's not about balancing geographically. It's not even about balancing ethnicity. It's now about balancing a personality. And we haven't seen that in a long time.
And by the way, I understand, Rick, that there's an outside chance, Rick, that Claire Underwood will be available, but that's another story for another time.
She's a Democrat. She's a Democrat.
Okay, no spoilers. Michael Brown, Rick Ungar, gentlemen, thanks so much. We'll get to Batman and Superman next time. I have that feeling. Apple's big mistake or biggest techno success? Only the FBI knows. Coming up next, right here on The Hard Line.